I was able to attract the attention of this fellow right here, Dr. Tyvin Rich, who is one of the lead cancer researchers and cancer clinicians at UVA Medical. And Tyvin is a very interesting guy. I think probably was an old hippie at some point. So he had a tendency to just not dismiss things because they seemed weird. UVA already fancied itself as being forward-looking. They were using yoga and things like that as forms of therapy. So when Tyvin got a hold of my book, he was like, "Okay, I want to try some use this as a complementary therapy." He and I did some work together with small population of people. He gave me a couple of patients. One woman reduced her lethal cancer, her tumor site, shrunk it significantly. So it was enough to get Tyvin's attention. And then I took Tyvin to Phil, and then Phil sponsored, again, this is HMI 2, sponsored a trip, a 10-day trip with me and Tyvin and going back and revisiting many of the places that we tried to interact with back in the late 90s. However, this was another step function higher. You could see that China had developed quite a bit. They had shut down Wu Xiaoju had basically been shut down and exiled because of the Falun Gong debacle. They had a stranglehold on Qigong. There are only five legit systems. This is the new reformed Qigong society here. And there's Lu. He was right in the middle of it. And it was based on very much on the Western model. It was a feel-good approach to Qigong. Instead of feeling these extraordinary things that I was taught to feel, it was you got to be happy. The emphasis was on being happy. And if you did anything that made you unhappy, such as disgruntled or unhappy with the government, then that was bad Qigong. You don't get in. It had to be positive. And however, when Tyven and I went out among the population, we went to Tiantan Heaven Temple, and a lot of people practice out there in these various parks that they have around here. Tenton's the biggest one. I saw people doing old school martial art and qigong, and I went over and asked them. I said, "Are you feeling?" And I used traditional Chinese terms, and they were like, "Yeah," but they did it privately, and nobody messed with them. But if you got out there and stood on a street corner and started trying to create a school with a large following, like Falun Gong had done, you got shut down. So at that time, this is 2007, and this is pre-Olympics. So China was feeling its oats then. It was on the move. And Tyven, we tried as hard as we could. Tyven presented to 301 Hospital and some very important people. Um, Tyven also,
You should add that 301 hospital is the Bethesda of China. It's the military,
yes,
key
and
military hospital.
and the best. I mean, the very best um, practitioners of traditional and conventional medicine, Western medicine, work there on the leadership. And Tyven presented to them. I presented to them. We made contact with a couple of the leaders in 301, and Tyven ended up bringing them to UVA. And once again, we ran into this, I don't, the lethargy of that institution, proving that it isn't just the military, it is large institutions. And Tyven was an insider, and he still couldn't get them to budge. And they didn't want to spend the money. They had their own quote unquote contacts in China that they wanted to work with, and they didn't accomplish anything as far as I can tell. But what Tyven did for me was that he raised some startup funds. I funded the rest of it um, to create a DVD. And this is where we started thinking like, okay, and Phil had made this point to me many years ago. He said, you got to stop thinking of yourself as hardware. You need to be software, meaning you got to have a method that can scale. So with a DVD, I can scale that and pass it around and then people that want um, deeper understanding, can sign up for private lessons. That was sort of the business side of it. But Tyvin wanted to see if it would work as a cancer therapy. So he invested, the cancer department at UVA is the richest department in the entire medical school. So they have tons of money lying around. He gathered some of those funds for research purposes, so it was all legit, and essentially allowed me to create this DVD, which ended up helping me later on.